I feel stuck in my game's development, and it's something that needed to happen. I've been working on this personal game project in my free time over the course of 2 months. The main reason I chose to make this devlog now is to talk about how this experience of making my own game has changed my view of progress in game development. It's because of this project and talking with friends that I recognize now the reason I felt stuck in game development was because I couldn't appreciate or recognize the progress I was actually making. Something important to bring up from my last devlog was that I made the decision to scrap most of my work I had made and start again with a new idea. With playtesting, I was able to see the holes in my first idea, and I needed to just have a fresh start. I needed a smaller scope and a better gameplay loop. While starting over was the best choice, it still hurt to see all of that progress disappear. And when I restarted, the only goal I had was to get back to the amount of progress I had achieved in my first idea. When starting a game project, going from an empty viewport to having a moving character picking up objects in your scene, it really feels like a massive leap forward in progression. It was after the first leap in progression that I ended up getting stuck. No matter how much I added, it didn't feel like I was progressing at the same rate. Paired with the feeling that I needed to get back to the same level of completion as my last idea, I felt like the only solution was to work harder. Throughout those days, I was a machine, adding content, trying to achieve the same level of accomplishment I had felt when I made the early block out. And because all I wanted to do was add more, I wasn't testing. And my main mechanic to collect ore was boring, and I couldn't see that at the time. I was too busy adding new stuff. I continued to add more, switching over to level design, making blockouts of different interactable structures, rushing to create an early alpha with the hope that when I reached that point, everything would just naturally come together with a little polish. After sending out an early alpha version of my game to some friends, the main feedback I got was that the process to collect ore wasn't fun. It needed improvement. And they were right. At face value, the process to get ore was to stand in one spot and press W. I stopped what I was doing and started to just make any idea that came to mind with the hope that I would stumble upon something that works. During this process, one idea that stood out, and I worked to polish it up before showing it off, was the idea of taking the game Snake and turning the map into a board of mystery squares. A player would use the machine to control the snake, to flip over those mystery squares, and have a chance of spawning in an ore. Now, Snake is a fun game, and I'm just adding a small twist to make it work in my project. But one piece of feedback I got about this idea when I showed it off was that it felt out of place. After looking online, a very simple piece of advice stood out. Don't make mechanics in a vacuum. Almost every other idea I had were all separate to the actual game and felt like they were out of place. Now, I took a break, came back with a fresh mind, and I'm happy to say I have a new mechanic which I feel is promising that I'll talk about later. But first, I wanted to finish talking about my main point, because the moral of the story isn't I did a bunch of trial and error until stuff worked out. My problem was that I felt stuck in development because I saw ideas that weren't solutions only as failing. That's wrong. The mistake I made was looking at any setback as a waste of time, as starting over. This is not true. The mistakes I made early on helped me find success down the line. The point I'm trying to make is every time you restart, every scrapped idea or failed experiment all result in moving forward. Progress doesn't mean you succeeded. It means you worked towards something. Or, to quote Bob Ross, as long as you are learning, you are not failing. Now, this is still a devlog, so the rest of the time will be explaining work that has gone into this project since the last devlog, The main theme of the game is resource management, inspired by some board games I've been recently playing. For everything I've made so far for this new version, I'm going to explain it using my gameplay loop. This loop is made of the main mechanic, which gives you resources, which are used to complete your quota, and any remaining resources can be used to buy upgrades, increasing the production of said resources. I'm going to go through each square and explain work I did that connects to that area. The current mechanic I have is the player collects ore, then shoots that ore at unstable rocks, which breaks and spawn in more ore to collect. The method I have to collect ore has gone through a lot of different phases, the first being a wheel, where a player would attach themselves to and push it in a circle to generate ore, the second one being the snake drill minigame. At the moment, I feel very happy with the current idea I have, using the idea of shooting to breaking your way through mounds of mystery rocks, almost like the map is made up of walls that have mystery boxes that need to be opened. Before moving on, I want to talk a little bit more about the thought process that went into this ore collection mechanic. So, first, I made my unstable rocks and gave them two conditions that need to be true for them to break. First, if an object collides with it, that object needs to have the tag ore. And second, that object needs to have a velocity of 4 or greater. If both these are true, it will roll a random number and spawn 1 to 3 new ore for the player to pick up. Now, while both of these worked, they also had large issues with them. One issue was when I broke a rock, the ore that spawned would cause a chain reaction breaking multiple rocks at the same time, which is something I didn't want to happen. To fix this, I knew I only wanted ore that I, as the player, shot to break rocks. So, ore that is spawned from rocks does not have the ore tag, and only when a player shoots ore is the tag added to that object. Another issue was that the unstable rocks were too small, allowing the player to break multiple rocks at once. So a simple change was making them larger. The final issue I changed was with checking velocity. The idea with this check is that the player has to charge their system like a water gun, meaning they need to charge up for powerful shots. If there is not enough power, the rock does not break. The issue here is that there are other ways to gain velocity, like gravity. So I noticed you could simply shoot into the air and the ore would gain enough velocity from falling to break any rock. The change I made was to create my own velocity, meaning that each rock now has a variable called power. When it is spawned in, its power is equal to its velocity. This power is then decreased by a set drag force every second, and when that rock or ore hits the unstable rock, it will check what its current power is at and determine if it should break. With those issues out of the way, my shooting mechanic is now working, and in the next devlog, I'll cover how I worked a little bit more to make it more fun, maybe adding back in the ability to shoot multiple unstable rocks at once. Now, moving on, a key part of the game is resource management. And the simple explanation is that when you obtain ore, you can do three things with it. You can shoot it to collect more ore, deposit it to complete your quota and earn money, or save it inside of an ore silo so you can have it carry over to the next round. For maintaining the resources, each player is added to a list and their data is temporarily stored using a C# file. So your purchases and ore is contained just for that game and does not work as a save file. You'll need to find the best way to save enough ore to complete your quotas while selling enough so you can have money to reinvest and improve your production. At the end of every 2 rounds, you will have a required quota that you'll need to complete. If you fail to complete this quota, the game ends. The quota system isn't anything new and is greatly inspired by games like Overcooked or Lethal Company. For the quota system I have, I use a C-sharp mono behavior script that is held inside of a little game manager. In the script, I have a list of scriptable objects that let me easily add or edit the quotas I have in my game. The final part I want to talk about is upgrades. At the end of every level, you and your team will be teleported to a separate area where you can spend the money you have made to buy upgrades. The upgrades are split into two types, with personal upgrades improving your own character's abilities, shot power, speed, inventory space, and even extra time. Then you have your team upgrades, which will increase the chances of ore appearing, lowering the requirements for quotas, or increasing the sell value of ore. You will also be able to unlock and improve your ore silos at the upgrade shop. Welcome to the end of the video. This is my somewhat brief explanation of the work I've been doing. There's a lot more to talk about, but this is the highlights and important parts. If you're a game designer or someone who has been having a problem with a personal project like I did, I hope this video was somewhat helpful. If you have any feedback or suggestions, feel free to share it. And thank you again for watching, and I'll be returning to working on my project.